Ready, set, go.
Let me get rid of that big pop-up. Welcome to the Sweet Spot, an Updog podcast. I'm Andrea Morissette.
And I'm Kat Faley.
And we are your hosts today. Kat is going to be joining us as a host today because Jack Faley happens to be our main guest today. So give it up for our bonus co-host and our awesome guest today, Kat and Jack Faley. Woo-hoo!
Woo!
All right, so today's topic, the reason why we have Jack as our guest today is today's topic is the origins of four-way play. And since there was only four of us there during the origins of four-way play, and we haven't had Jack as a guest on our podcast yet, we thought he would be the perfect person to talk to today about how four-way play got started.
So Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so that we can get to know you better?
Oh, okay. Well, I am married to the most wonderful person.
That's a great start.
And I am seriously, I am blessed to have some amazing disc dogs. Kat and I got started with disc over 20 years ago. My current disc dogs are Ferris, Wham, and Remix. Spice is occasionally on a good day she'll play a little bit. So she's still going, but and my local club is Central Florida Dog and Disc Club. If it weren't for my local club 20 some years ago, Updog would probably not be in existence. I would definitely not be part of it, and I wouldn't have had this amazing journey that I've had with Kat and the dogs.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, welcome to our podcast as our guest this time, Jack. I'm very much looking forward to you getting to be time warpy today. That's pretty exciting. Although you did write your own questions, so
no, I randomly pulled them from the internet, and I tried not to look at them really closely. So
all right, good.
Sort of had a heads up, but not really.
All right, good. So first question for you today is, how did four-way play become one of our first games that we ever created for Updog? So tell us a little bit about the origin, how we came up with it.
So anybody that listened to the last podcast knows that there were 3 games that we started Updog with, and that is throw and go, four-way play, and fragility. And the idea behind four-way play, look at how quickly this is happening, Dre. The idea behind four-way play honestly was about making the entry level into freestyle easier, because in a long time ago, boys and girls, there were only 2 games essentially in disc dogging. There was freestyle and toss and fetch. And toss and fetch meant you get one disc, you go to one side of the field or the other, and you just go back and forth with your dog. And then if you'd like to play the other game, you go ahead and grab 6 more discs from your bag, and then go out here and do all sorts of team movement and cool throws and everything else. You know, you should be totally prepared to do that after doing that toss and fetch. And I was just like, so from my personal disc dog journey, I played toss and fetch only for how long?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And I just kept watching freestyle going, there's no way I'm ever going to do that. I can't do that. How would I do that? And it was only just playing around in the yard, throwing stuff to my dog, where I was like, oh, that was kind of cool that my dog caught it that way. And if I wasn't the type of person that would have stuck around for 2 years trying things, it would have been really hard for me to start playing freestyle. So when all of us were talking about, like, what should we have as a game, I know for sure, like Dre and I especially were talking about freestyle and how do we get teams like more comfortable with the center of the field and moving their dog around the field and doing different throws in different locations on the field. And so that's really kind of how I remember the idea for four-way play coming about.
Is getting people to be comfortable moving their dog around the field.
Yep. And then part of it was also like we talked about on the last podcast was that easier entry into the sport, and four-way play, you could do a 6-inch toss and play that game. So if, even if you didn't know how to throw a frisbee more than a couple feet, you could still play four-way play. So that factored into it as well.
True. Yes.
That was like a bonus feature of four-way play, I guess,
Yeah.
And I want to acknowledge you, Jack. That's 3 in a row. 3 times you brought up freestyle first.
Oh, yeah.
I got to keep track of these things. So that's good. All right. So when you guys were beta testing, when we were coming out with four-way play, how did we determine that it was 4 discs? And was it always 4 discs? Like, what did we do first? Do you remember? I don't remember that at all.
I remember I threw that question in there because I was hoping somebody else would remember.
I don't remember at all.
I remember playing around with different amounts of discs, but I don't remember how we settled on 4. We probably just settled on 4 because it was called four-way play and there were 4
Four-way play.
zones.
Yep. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and that kind of became a thing, right? Like in 7-Up, you get 5 discs because you have to get 5 catches, and in Funky, you get 4 discs because you got to get 4 catches. So, I think that's probably how it came about. But honestly, I was hoping somebody remembered. But I do remember playing like beta testing with different numbers of discs, and and this was, of course, way back again a long time ago, where sometimes people were just like, I don't want a whole bunch of discs because I can't even hold them right. They would walk around like, holding them like this or whatever. And somehow we settled on 4
in the sweet spot because they didn't need them. Some teams do that. Like
right. Let me set these down here.
Yeah. Yeah. So it didn't create what we wanted with the extra discs or the different varieties of discs.
I have a bonus question that's not on this list, but who can tell me the original name of the game four-way play?
Oh, geez. Tic-tac-toe.
Oh, wasn't it foreplay?
Yes, it was foreplay.
Okay. Yeah, and I guarantee that Babs voted for that name.
I don't remember that. I just know that once we introduced the sweet spot, it was Gary Duke beta testing. And we had the sweet spot and foreplay, and we knew immediately we had to change the name.
That pushed it over the edge. We kept the sweet spot, but we needed to put away in there.
We're like, we need to keep Updog family friendly.
Exactly.
Let's not have one of our first 3 games be like sexually charged.
Exactly.
I just thought of this random idea that I've never thought of before, but one way that we can change up our games in order to challenge our players is we could, like, once a year, pick one game where we change the number of discs that you're allowed to have for that whole season. Think of the different strategies and patterns that we would get. Like, I have an eyelash. The patterns that we're using wouldn't work with different numbers of discs. It's like Fireball, right? It's totally Fireball, which you guys, we'll have a Fireball conversation at some point when that game goes live. But one of the fun things about the Fireball game is that once the Fireball part of the song comes up, you never know when it's going to happen. So you can't predict how many discs you're going to have. Right. So so it kind of develops that on the fly disc management that we're trying to work. But if we were to change that number randomly, let's say we changed it for four-way play, that next year they only get to play with 3. Yeah. I bet we would like so many, that could be a way of like challenging one of our games or something for the year, that like some special, I don't know. I had never even thought about changing the number of discs on an existing game before, but I think that could be a fun, like, kind of challenge that we give our players to keep things fresh at some point if we decide that we needed to like throw a wrench in there to keep things interesting, because it works perfectly with 4. But if you change anything about that, it's going to change everything. It's going to change the patterns.
Yeah.
I don't think we've done this. I'm trying to think back at all the level 2s. I don't think in any of the level 2s you get less discs.
No, but that might, like, we don't have a level 2 greedy yet.
Well, yeah.
That
might agility.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
And go.
Well, true, but not.
And then you're not. Well, you can't throw the.
Right. You can only throw one in level 1, but maybe like greedy level 2. Maybe you don't get 8 discs.
People would love that.
Greedy with 4 discs, that would be horrible. Anyway.
Okay, so you're up, Kat. Next question.
How did you come up with things like clearing a quad, the sweet spot, and sugar rushes?
So, of course, clearing a quad, I think that was just me, a four-sided figure is a quadrilateral. We've got 4 score zones, so it's clearing a quad. That was kind of an easy one, especially from elementary math teacher.
Yes.
But then and that became then something that we said on the microphone, and sometimes none of these things were planned out. They just sort of happened as we started playing, as we started judging, and then somebody would start calling something out a certain way, and we'd be like, oh, that makes sense. Let's call it that. And to the point that now some of those things are actual, like in the judges course and stuff, like, hey, when this happens, you call out cleared quad, so that one I think was just kind of natural. And then the sweet spot, I know we talked a lot about this as a team. Because I think initially the sweet spot was something for four-way play from my recollection.
Right.
And then we liked that idea and we're like, why shouldn't that just be a thing for every game? And so now, of course, as we design our games, every single game has to have some sort of sweet spot, or like in Far Out, we call it the sweet shot. But like, got to have something that is that, it's just kind of, I say a gimmick. It's not really a gimmick. It's just kind of, it adds to the
little strategy.
Yeah, extra little
thing.
Right.
Little bonus.
Yeah.
Side quest.
Side quest bonus.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And we wanted something like we of course think about the games from the perspective of the dog and the human. But we also think about the games from the perspective of the rest of the club watching people play the games.
Right.
And we always thought it would be fun, like if at the end of the round there's some sort of drama that happens and the sweet spot creates drama, like, okay, I'm watching this game and they got the 1, they got the 3, they got the 4, it's kind of going along methodically, but then 4 seconds left. Oh crap, my disc is over there. I got to get that. I got to run to the sweet spot. Where's my dog? Get in the sweet spot. Yes, we got the sweet spot bonus.
And people on the side yelling, go to the sweet spot. Go to
you
the
need a
sweet spot.
disc. What are you doing? Like, we wanted to create that. Like, we wanted to create like people
engagement.
Engagement from other folks watching, and and I think that we've done that. And I think that it's amazing that our audience members, the non-players, get into it, because that makes the game more fun for everybody involved. And you're not just like sitting on the sidelines not paying attention. Not that we pay attention to every single round, but it's just fun to watch what happens in those final seconds.
Yeah, the audience is interactive at Updog, and I think that it changes. It does bring you into a little bit of that pressure that you feel playing freestyle. Because when you go on a freestyle field, people are watching that game. When you go to Disc-Dogathon, for example, if we're going to take it outside of Updog context, not everybody's watching every game. But if their freestyle is playing, pretty much everybody's watching freestyle. And it's the same thing for our games, right? And so there's this so much pressure around freestyle that they may not get from the other games. But if we add that little bit at the end, it creates that crowd interaction. And so people are calling out stuff from the sidelines during the game. And then at the end of the game, everybody's engaged to see if they're going to get that bonus at the end. So I think it does kind of create that audience participation that we love so much about freestyle, but for the other games as well.
Yep.
And what's I think is really cool is how our players have like maximized the sweet spot. And figured out ways, like, you guys mentioned the sugar rush. The sugar rush is not something that like A, we came up with, and B, we didn't even come up with the name either. Like, I don't know who came up with the name Sugar Rush. I just know at some point we started using it and it became a thing.
Yeah, I don't know who came up with it.
Like, and it was, and even the strategy of the sugar rush, which, by the way, I should step back for a second and maybe we should tell people what the sugar rush is, because they may not know. But essentially the sugar rush is just a name that we've given to the strategy of when time is ticking down, is there a way for you to get the sweet spot bonus plus some additional scoring on the board, on the game,
but you're not just sitting in the sweet spot for 5 seconds. Right. You could potentially get another zone and still be in the sweet spot.
Right. And So it was the players that somebody said, oh, that's like a sugar rush because you're in the sweet spot, but yet other things are happening. And so like the name Sugar Rush just kind of like was organically came out with somebody, and it's a legend that we'll never know.
I don't know. Maybe that person does know.
Maybe somebody will pop into our comments and say, hey, that was me. I was the first one to say Sugar Rush.
Yeah.
So if it's you, if you're the owner and the creator of the Sugar Rush, please let us know in the comments and give us a shout out that you are the one that came up with that Sugar Rush name, because you're kind of famous now. That's what we say. Everybody's going for the Sugar Rush.
And
Right.
and now, I mean, it's evolved so much. We loved the fact that it was something. The Sugar Rush was something. Like Kat said, we didn't like the fact that somebody might stand there for 10 seconds because they were afraid of missing out on the sweet spot bonus, and so they didn't want to go for another zone. And then somebody figured out, well, hey, you could do both, right? Like you could get the sweet spot bonus and try to go for this next zone. And it was actually, not to go into another game, I'll just say this though, but it was actually that made us rewrite the rules for throw and go and add the active sweet spot bonus.
Addict, yeah. Yep. Interesting, right? And I think, kind of what's been really cool with Updog, and maybe it's like this with other organizations, I don't know, I've only been a part of creating one, but every time that we propose a new game, we give it to essentially the foundation clubs sometimes that originally started with us and tested our games, like beta testing and stuff, and they break it. And that helps us to understand like where the holes are in our rules. And some of those breaks are that potato chip theory, man. Like they're accidents, and the accident becomes a sweet spot. It's just somebody finding a small strategy in the game that's so good that you want to adapt it as like an achievement, or something that they can use as a known strategy to kind of expand their level of the game. So that's really cool. We love when our players stretch the rules to come up with exactly how much you can squeeze out of every opportunity to get points. So that was really cool.
It's a love-hate.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the person that always finalizes and writes the rules, like one thing that when I first started writing up the rules was, in my head, I was like, all right, we don't want to be about 20,000 rules. Like I want to, like, here's the idea of the game, here's the spirit of the game, and then here's the general rules. Now, if something comes about, because if you leave it more open, like you said, Dre, then people like come up with strategies and they figure out, oh, but you could also play it this way. Like, and I think that's great as long as it stays within the spirit of the game. And sometimes when we find something that is not within the spirit of the game, that's when we tweak the rules, and we have to add in another rule like, oh, you can't do this, or no, you must do this. Like, I mean, I still think it's cool that people try to think of ways to eke out extra points. Like I know myself, I try to cheat the system, and now there's a rule against it where, like, in a lot of the games where you have to start in the zone that you're standing in. And so I would say ready, set, and I would immediately get my dog started to run in the direction that I was going to send it, because they're still in that square, like on spaced out or something like that. They're still in this square, but I would throw the disc, and my argument was, well, my dog hasn't caught it. It's in the atmosphere, and there's an atmosphere rule.
The atmosphere rule, actually.
So then we wrote a disc that said you can't, or wrote a rule rather that said you can't release a disc before the G and go, because people were doing that, and that made it really hard. First of all, it's cool that people come up with strategies like that, but sometimes it makes it hard for the judges to judge, and then we have to go, all right, we can't do that. So yeah, definitely our players break the games, which is great. But sometimes we got to come back and make the rules a little bit more firm because we've left them too open. But initially, we want them to be open because we want teams to come up with stuff. Like Dre mentioned, Fireball is going to be released in January, and teams will break it. Somebody's going to break it, and I'm going to have to go back and write more strict rules because someone's going to come up with something that I didn't think of, and that's okay. But if it's not within the spirit of the game, or if it's too hard for judges to judge or whatever, then we have to kind of, we got to come down on you guys a little bit.
But, you also could discover the next sweet spot. So
Exactly.
break away. We're grateful for whatever you come up with. And I don't write the rules, so just break as much as you'd like. I just read them and agree to them. So speaking of four-way play game rules, did the idea for the game like come from somewhere else, or like where did we get the idea for four-way play?
Do you remember? I don't know.
I don't have much recollection of the beginning of four-way play.
Yeah, other than what I've already kind of said, I feel like we maybe already hit that one because other than like, I know we wanted it to be an active game where the person was moving around, moving their dog around,
like purposefully moving their dog around the field.
Right.
Our background coming from Ron and April's, Disc Foundation is, like having dogs catch on the, have a dog on a flank and catching a disc and that kind of stuff, like to help with freestyle movements. But I know that's all the basic concept, but I don't remember the actual like beginning.
I mean, I will say that I guess Disc Dogathon was a thing, right?
Yes, it was already a
so
thing.
I'm sure I remember when I was coming up with what does the Updog field look like, I do remember thinking to myself, I don't want to have people that run our events create different fields for different games. Like that would just be too crazy.
Right.
Like we don't need a circular field and a rectangular field and a hexagon field, or like whatever the field is, that's the field, and we'll use the zones that we've got to create different games. And like I definitely stole the bonus strip down the middle from the USDDN field. I was like, I like that, but let's make it wider. So we made that wider, which made the outside zones of the of our field be a little bit harder to hit. So I know that like as I was creating four-way play and writing up the rules and finalizing it, that what our field looked like definitely came into play. And what should our field look like so that it could, be open to lots of different games?
Yeah, that's interesting because I remember when we were talking about the width of the field being 10 yards so that it was easier to hit down the middle, but I hadn't at the time processed that the side ones would be harder to hit in the strategy game, so that actually makes it more difficult. So it's easier for newer people, and then as your level increases, the part that made it easier actually makes it more challenging as you go up in proficiency of throwing the disc, maybe. Or difficulty of game strategy, because some of our games are simpler. Throw and go and four-way play and fragility are relatively simple games as far as patterns are concerned, compared to games like Greedy or Funky or Boom, where you're strategizing difficult throws to specifics or spaced out. I would say it was a kind of a mid-level game. Simple concept, right? But it's harder to make the throws.
Yeah, and then And I would say four-way play, fragility, and throw and go, you could actually do a players meeting in 3 minutes. Once we get to Greedy and like Boom, now we're talking, you're going to need a few more minutes.
Yeah, Time Warp is hard to, it's a very simple game, but it has a lot of little caveats in it and strategies that you have to think like on the fly that totally change, whether you win that game or not. So that's really interesting. So how did we come up with our points for each game? We varied the sweet spot points on almost all of our games, so that's something interesting also. And then achievements. So the achievements we covered a little bit on our first episode about founder stuff with Jason, where we talked about how our achievement system kind of came from the idea of video games. So how do we come up with our achievements for Updog, and then how do we determine the point values for things like the sweet spot changing in the games or the point values of our zones and stuff?
So the sweet spot values, I know like, and everything is kind of, I mean, we always bring it back to our team for finalization, and it goes back and forth between team members. And sometimes things aren't finalized until after we beta tested it a number of times. But the sweet spot value, we try to make it like that balance of like if we made the sweet spot worth 2 points in fragility, it wouldn't be worth going for it. You'd be like, I'm not even going to screw with it. I'm just going to keep running around and going over these jumps. But if it's worth 10 points, okay, maybe I pull my dog off the last jump and we get in the sweet spot. So it always had to have that balance of like, yes, it needs to be enough to entice you to get it, but it can't be too much so that you're like, oh crap, I'm going to spend the last 10 seconds just standing in the sweet spot because it's worth so much. It's not worth it to me to try to even go get another jump.
Yeah.
Like, so it's kind of like that balance.
Yeah. And in four-way play, you're already in the sweet spot. Unless you're picking up discs, like you're already there and you only need one disc with you, with your dog. So it's, I mean, again, as one of our foundation games and one of our great entry level games, it's pretty easy to get the sweet spot. So it's worth 2.
Yep.
So lower point value, easier to accomplish versus having, for example, compared to fragility, where they have the opportunity to score 15 points just by completing all 3 obstacles and passing on the sweet spot. But if they're a higher level handler, they might be able to get 2 of those moves, pull the dog off that pattern, and still get 10 points for that, plus 10 points for the sweet spot. So there's all different levels of strategically hitting that point value. That's cool.
Well, and in four-way play now, like I know there's a bunch of times I end up in the last closing seconds because so many people have done different things, and you know that you can get like the sugar rush, you can get in the sweet spot and then also make a throw, but only if I have an extra disc, or I can do a roller. Right. And because it's rolling on the ground, it's not in the atmosphere, and so I can do a roller with just one disc. Plus, if I do a roller, my dog's had a little extra time to go grab it. All these things are going on in my head at the last second, and I swear half the time I end up throwing the sweet spot throw, not from the sweet spot. Because I'm like gathering discs, my dog's running, and I make a throw, and I'm like, yes! And the judge is like, dude, you weren't even in the sweet spot. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool strategies in there. And I think that you alluded to one of the interesting things that I like about several of our games is that like decision making under stress. Again, it's a freestyle skill. Like that's the hardest thing for people when they're first starting freestyle. As soon as they go out there, they go and they can't do anything, get everything, right? So these are all like microtransactions of practicing delivering under stress, delivering under stress, delivering under stress. And by the way, this applies to your regular life too. It helps with work and your regular life being able to handle stressful situations. So play more Updog.
There we go. Let's capture that little bit and put that out as a commercial.
Yep. I like that.
All right, Kat, you're up.
When Updog first created four-way play, what did you think the highest possible score would be?
So I remember thinking that somebody might get 3 quads, okay, and that the most anybody would get was 4 quads. And I didn't even think anybody would get 4 quads, but I just figured when I made the first score sheet, there were 4 quads on the first score sheet. And Kat would maybe a better historian on this than me because she does a lot of digging in the team site. But I think the first triple quad was Frank Montgomery and one of his dogs.
I think you might be right on that.
And when that happened, I was just like, oh my God, it's like amazing. Someone got 3 quads. And and so I think it wasn't until, speaking of people breaking the game, and it wasn't until people came up with patterns that they could practice and work with their dog that somebody came up with a tetraquad, which is 4 quads. And I know that Troy Moole was the first person to ever get a tetraquad. And I know that he had a system. Like, it wasn't just willy-nilly throwing discs around. Like, he was like, all right, I think if I followed this pattern and I got this pattern with my dog, that I could get, a tetraquad. And at the time, for about, I think our bounty stood for about 2 months. like no one got it. Once we had a few triple quads, we're like, hey, let's put some money out there and see. Let's entice people to try to get a tetra quad, and we'll say who I don't even remember what was our bounty, like $100 or $200. I mean, it wasn't a ton of money, but it was enough to, like, entice people to do it. Troy would know how much money he got paid, but anyways, it was fun to see, like, who's going to come up with a way to be efficient on the field and get their dog to get that tetra quad.
Yeah.
That said, that really actually created people gaming the game and figuring out patterns that, to be completely honest, aren't in the spirit of the way that the game was created. Because, in freestyle, you don't run around in a pattern throwing, 2-foot throws to your dog, but that's okay. Like, they just found another strategy, another way to play the game. And so that wasn't the strategy that I used, but it's definitely the strategy that will get you the highest score.
Well, what do you think about that? The way that people pattern things, like, how do you feel about it? Aside from, like, that it's not what you intended for it, but, like, being that that's like the main strategy now.
I mean, I'll be honest and say that when it first happened, I was like, that's not how you play my game or whatever. like why'd you break the game? But
How it was.
right. So, like, at first it was like, we had these designs on why this game was going to be there and how it was going to help people to create this particular skill. And then when it's played in a way that is not building that skill, my initial reaction is, no, that's not what we wanted. But honestly, it is a different skill. Like, it's just not the one that maybe was the initial intention. So it took me a while to, like, be okay with how people, do that. Like, Kat knows, she's sitting here kind of like smirking because, I have many conversations, obviously, with Kat about things, and, like, I see things and I'm like, oh, did you see this new strategy? Like, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, nowadays, it's going to happen. It's okay. Like, one person's strategy is not another person's strategy. And also, it goes to the bigger picture of freestyle too. Like, I have some strong opinions about how freestyle should look and what I think looks cool and what I don't like in freestyle. But that's my opinion. Other people probably look at my freestyle and they're like, I don't like that. I would rather do it this way. That's whatever. But I'm just saying, like, it's differing strategies and differing opinions, and I'm totally good with it now. I know someone's going to break Fireball I'll give them till February.
That's it. No changes until February.
Right. What's funny is that and by we, I mean Jack and I, in CFDDC have created a bunch of updog purists. So, like, some of them are more upset about that four-way play short game than even Jack is. They're just like, they're like, I hate it. It's not how it's supposed to be played. Da, 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 da.
Well, they're not going to win with it.
No, they do win with that short game.
No, but I think Dre's saying that.
Oh.
Dre's saying that. You're not going to win with you won't win with the initial strategy of using flanking and front crosses and rear crosses to move your dog around the field. Like, you're not going to win with that because that's not going to be the most efficient way to get scores.
But I'm just saying, I think it's funny that, like, we've created a bunch of little purists that are, like, think like we do. We didn't do it on purpose, but
I mean, that's also what creates great conversations about the games. I mean, if they weren't a little controversial, you wouldn't have as much conversation about them.
You'd be bored.
Yeah. I never even thought about creating patterns until they already started happening.
Well, I mean, think about fragility too. Like, that's
Sarah started patterning just to go around the jumps, and everybody was like, oh, that's a good idea.
That's a lot easier than me running everywhere.
Me running to every single one. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll talk more about that in the fragility
episode.
So, have we used four-way play as the foundation game for any more, what, like I was speaking of earlier, more high-level games or the more challenging, complex strategy games? Has four-way play influenced any of those or the creation of any of those?
I mean, I think the obvious one is Funky. Because Kat was looking for a way to kind of have a combination game between using jumps and doing something like four-way play. And so I mean that one's, anybody that can't tell that one, I mean, that you haven't played four-way play then.
Right.
Or they're just completely overwhelmed by Funky. Like if you get out there and you see that big old field, sometimes it's hard to see the four-way play field in the middle of that.
True.
Yeah.
What's going on? For my brain anyway, like Funky isn't one of my favorite games because I get overwhelmed by all the many obstacles. But I do in video games.
Too many things out here.
Yeah, if I play an open world game, I get completely overwhelmed. If I play a linear path game, I'm totally fine, right? So strategies work well for me, but like organizing the strategy with all of those pieces of the puzzle is just hard for my brain. So I don't naturally see four-way play inside of there. I know it's in there because we created the game, but I think that people that have trouble with like a larger field of gameplay with so many options might not think that obviously that's basically a four-way play field with an obstacle in between each one. So it's like four-way play on steroids, on agility steroids.
What were you going to say about something?
No, I didn't know if the dogs were going to be a problem.
Oh, they're always a problem.
Just invite them to our podcast.
There's some sort of delivery happening right now, so they're going nuts.
It's not coming up on the audio. We can't hear.
Awesome.
Next question's yours, Kat.
All right. If Updog was able to rewrite the rules from scratch, would you change anything for four-way play?
Don't think about the amount of enormous work that is, Jack. Just set that aside.
No, I think that we kind of, Updog does that anyway. Like, you know what I mean? We do rewrite the rules, and so anything major that we would have changed, I think has been changed as we've made edits to the rules based on player feedback, based on data that we get in, things like that. So,
well, and I think that if anybody comes up with a major change, like it actually ends up a different game.
Right. That's
like
what
if
I was
it's
gonna
major,
say.
then it becomes a different game.
Yeah.
Because we have to keep the integrity of the original game. We have to keep, like you can't all of a sudden introduce 10 discs of four-way play or something like that to that'll mess up the high scores and mess up, strategies and all kinds of stuff. Like, like you talked about earlier, maybe changing the number of discs. If we did that, it wouldn't be something drastic like that. It might be 3 discs or 5 discs, but like we would never be like, hey, how about 10 discs in four-way play? Because that would just like blow the game out of the water, So
no one would move. They would just stand in the middle and throw around.
Right?
I would just run around in circles.
Yep.
Run around the circles, yeah. And I had another random question come up that isn't on our thing either. Have there been any games that we like ditched at beta testing?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know that there have been a few that we have rules for. Like we have an intro freestyle game. Jason has an intro freestyle game. Neither one of them have been launched yet, right? And we have some rules and ideas around them. But do we have other ones that we just like tried and we're like, nah, that's not going to work?
We have one that we tried, we beta tested, we broke it, and then the next day Greedy was born. But Jack can tell you more about that.
I mean, that was a good synopsis, Kat.
Yeah.
So I don't think I need to say anything more. But yeah,
well, Gary and Remix broke it. We can add that. He's very proud of the fact. Gary's very proud of the fact that he and Remix broke our game before we even got it going.
So yeah, there's been things like that, and there's been there's another one that we beta tested called Blackjack, where you want I really like this idea of additional strategies going on in your head while you're playing the game, kind of almost like a game show. So in Blackjack, you had to get as close to 21 without going over. Like when the time ended, if you were over 21, your score was nothing. You busted. If you were under 21, then you got those points. And And so I put it together, we beta tested it, and like the current rules for the game just basically it worked, but a lot of people said it was too hard to keep track of things in their head. And so I still think it's a valuable idea, and it's not like totally dead in the water, but it's just it's on the back burner. Like I got to think of a way to make it easier for people to play, but I just think that it's a cool concept.
Yeah. No, I loved hearing that. That sounds super cool as a strategy game. So you need some insight on that one. Just throw me the rules and I'll try and unbreak it in my head for you.
Yeah, the game that we broke, that was where you would like, it was kind of like throw and go, but you could switch sides of the field.
Yeah.
So like midway through the game, you could run to the other side of the field and throw from there, or you had to.
And
I don't even know.
Well, before the game started, you declared what your ends of the field were. So you could say, I'm going end zone, like the last line, like 50 yards. My field's going to be 50 yards long. Or you could say, no, my field's going to be 20 yards long. If you're not a runner, your dog doesn't go far, you can't throw far. So you declared it, and then you could throw from either side. And there were other rules involved, but it was basically throw and go where you could switch sides.
That's really interesting, actually. Wonder if we can combine that in the blackjack game. Like every time you switch sides of the field,
I have
every time you switch, it doubles the point. So it'd be 1 point for the first throws from the first side. You switch sides, they'd be 2 points. Switch sides, it'd be 3 points per throw.
Or every time you hit blackjack, you have to switch sides of the field.
Well, the thing with blackjack was, so like it was fine if you went over 21 as long as time hadn't expired.
Yeah.
So like there were score zones where you could get minus points.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm telling you, it's a cool game and it will happen one day. I just have to come up with a way to make it easier.
If the app becomes like a thing that's used very widely, it would be a game that would be easy to do with the app, because then the judge who's scoring it could be like, you're at 18 points, you know.
Right. And that's true, Kat. Like sometimes it's the judging of the game that is too difficult. Like the game itself might be fun, and as a player you could do it, but then you'd look at the judge and be like, so what was my score? And they're like, I don't freaking know. You went up, down, sideways. I don't know what the score is anymore.
So yeah, it'll be if the app, you know, like I said,
turns out the score for you.
Right, then that'll introduce other games, because they'll suddenly become easier to judge because somebody's not having to do math on the fly. But we'll see.
Yeah. There is a wasteland of ideas, game ideas that have like started and then are just in a folder of like, okay, maybe someday.
Shake them all up, smash a few together. It'll be like freestyle. You just smash a few game concepts together and make a whole new game.
Yep. Somebody emailed us the other day. They like, do you take game ideas? So it's like, yeah, sure. Feel free to send them. I said, you know, we've got 2 new games launching this year, so we're not going to be doing anything like this year, but you know, we'll look at them and consider them for the future.
Yeah, and when we launch new games too, like when we going back to the question about like how did we set the achievements and the ups for 4-way play, we don't really know. Like we set achievements when we release the game, but even those get tweaked sometimes. Like for instance,
them on release, we didn't for greedy, did we?
Yeah, we had them. We just didn't. Yeah, we had them all listed, but we just didn't know what the we adjusted the values.
Oh, okay.
Because we don't know until people have played the game for a few months.
How they're going to impact,
like
right.
what's an average score from an average player? What's the highest level player going to be probably scoring at? Like we don't know those things until it's been out there for a while. So the ups and the achievements don't get really solidified until months after the game's been released.
Yeah. Well, what do you think about final thoughts for 4-way play? Because I'm feeling time warpy.
I'm good with that. Yeah, I don't have any more final thoughts on 4-way play, Kat.
Nope, me neither.
All right. If we missed something that you'd like to know about four-way play, put it in the comments and we can address it at the beginning of the next podcast.
Yeah, good questions. All right. So for those of you who don't know what our time warp challenge is, Jack has 60 seconds to answer 10 questions to the best of his ability. He can pass. We might heckle him a little bit on the pass. But the objective is to give quick, concise answers so we can get all 10 of those answers in 60 seconds. Kat, you're going to ask first question. I got the timer. Are you ready, Jack? All right. Ready, set, go.
What was your most treasured childhood present?
Hot Wheels.
Would you go to space if you could?
No.
What new skill would you choose to learn right now?
Car repair, mechanics.
Do you prefer driving a car, motorcycle, or bicycle?
Driving. A car, sorry.
What is your favorite Updog game?
I mean, freestyle. Yeah,
Okay,
but I mean, sometimes I don't think of
Shut
that
up.
as a game. Okay, quiet. Go.
If given a chance, on whom would you spy? 21 seconds left.
Russia.
What is your favorite dog disc to throw?
Superstar.
Do you have an addiction? 12 seconds.
Soda.
And buying things.
And buying.
What is the skill you have that others don't know about?
Seconds.
Music mixing.
And time.
You got
Did
9.
What was the last one?
And
If you
If you-
starred in a sitcom, what would be the name?
All jacked up.
oh, that's a good man.
And
Jack
that's
is on
why
fire today.
that's why he's the game creator.
Is why he's the game master. Well, game master, thank you for agreeing to be on our podcast today. You're on all the podcasts, but thank you for agreeing to be our guest on our podcast today. And Kat, thank you for agreeing to co-host with me today. It was very
Anytime.
fun. You did a
It was
great
lovely.
job.
So
Just remind you guys. Oh, Kat, what? Jack, what?
can I just say too, like, thank you to those folks that jotted ideas in the discussion page and gave us ideas for podcasts like this. Like, honestly, I wouldn't have known that anybody would want a podcast about each of the development of the game or whatever. But as we sat down and talked about it, it was pretty interesting recalling how things came together. So anyway, thanks for the ideas. Keep them coming. Let us know if you have an idea for a future podcast. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, like maybe you saw some of those ideas out there and you were like, I've got a lot to say about that, then we need you on the podcast. So reach out to Dre or I. You can Facebook message us and let us know you'd like to be on the podcast. We'd love to have you.
All right, Kat, this is where you say that you hope that you see people at an Updog event somewhere around the country. Ready, go.
Hey, we hope we see you at an Updog event soon.
And in the meantime, be kind to each other.
And be kind to your dogs.
Great job.
Bye, everybody. You need a disc. What are you doing?